Cursor's been around for a while. So it's kind of interesting that that people have started to talk about it now.
Toward a future which is AI-driven coding.
Wow, this is a really powerful tool for an actually really powerful coder.
Where I can automate this or streamline this, and what would I need to build to do so?
Most easy ways, if you want to get started, is obviously go to your favorite LLM, say you're a beginner, and this is what you want to build.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is September 5th, 2024. You're listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we're asking the question, why is everyone talking about Cursor? If you don't know what Cursor is, that's okay. We're going to get into that today. And we have all the right people to get that answer for you. We've got Jyunmi, Beth, Karl, Andy, and I'm Brian. And yeah, this is like, I think there's probably on this group, there's people more skilled than I am to talk about Cursor. I have done my homework, I will say. I found some really good resources, use Perplexity, as everybody should, to try to get a background on it. As somebody who doesn't code or don't really have a background in coding, like Beth, I know you have a background and you can find your way around Python. I've watched what you've built and stuff like that. As somebody who's never really done that but can hack their way, my curiosity was like, where does Cursor fit into this, into somebody like me versus the advanced? And so I think there'll be some really good questions about that. But before we go any further, let's just go ahead and talk about what Cursor is and why everybody got like in a frenzy about it over the last, let's say, week or two. I don't know. I kind of feel like, Beth, do you want to start with this, or do you want to pass to somebody else?
Sure, I'll start. So Cursor actually, I'm gonna play Andy for a second. Cursor's been around for a while, so it's kind of interesting that that people have started to talk about it now. Cursor, I believe, came out in 22 or 21, and it is a coding assistant. And basically, it is a coding assistant that's built on top of a very popular coding platform called VS Code, right? Visual Studio Code. And so it uses that as the back end, and it adds an LLM on top of it, meaning that you can code in natural conversation. And there are a couple different like avenues that it uses. It has a tab feature, which is kind of similar to other coding assistants like Copilot and those sorts of things that people have coded. Like actually, for Coding Assistant was probably the first real like widespread adoption of LLMs outside of something like Jasper that was going to help you write. Like the people who code were like, oh no, this is very repetitive. I'm good, right? Like this kind of thing can happen. So people who weren't like Go ChatGPT were already using some sort of LLM coding assistant, because as we say, right, large language models are designed to recognize patterns basically in languages or things that can function like languages. And code is a language. All of the different flavors of code are languages. So it was built on top of that. It means that you can do things like finish a code statement that you're starting to type just by hitting tab, and it gives you a thing that like you get a preview of what it's going to finish it with. But it also does so much more than that. Like it can anticipate where you're going to go in the next section of the code, and it will place your cursor there, right? I don't know why that's why it's called Cursor, but I don't know that's why I don't know it's not the reason. But it does make it more complicated to talk about when you're like, oh, and Cursor moves your cursor because Cursor is amazing with cursors, right?
Or as somebody mentioned, it should be called like tab, tab, tab or something like that, right? Yeah.
And I think that, this was sort of perfect storm as people were starting to understand how much Claude artifacts could build for you. And so that started, in my perception of this, that started the wave of this conversation. And then Andrej Karpathy posted something about using Cursor and said, wow, this is changing the way that I code. And he codes, right? Like, I mean, he can code in Notepad. Like old school, you could just write it all letter by letter. But he was saying this is changing the way that I am personally coding and the way that I am looking at what I'm doing. And that was sort of a voice from admired authority that made devs pay attention, developers pay attention. But then as that conversation built, then everybody else was like, oh, wow, no, like I can do this. And it's basically coding in natural language. Like you can say what you want the code to do and it will build it. And the other thing that we've said about code in this context is that when it gets the code wrong, it's immediately apparent or almost immediately apparent. Like it's different than getting a fact wrong in that's something that should have been in a report, because that's much harder to identify. But code works or it doesn't work, right? It's an immediate or a relatively immediate thing. It's much, much faster to do. So the risk of using something that's going to get it wrong some of the time is lower with code because you're going to test it. And you can take a screenshot or you can just copy and paste. The other nice thing about Cursor is that when it gives you an error code and you like put your cursor over it, it says, hey, do you want to ask about this? Right? Do you just want me to pop it over into a little chat thing because we see there's something wrong with this? So it anticipates it anticipates how you're going to want to use it to make it easier. That's my Cursor story. Andy, do you have? Did I get the history correct?
Yeah, that's good. I'll place it also in a progression from the time when you really had to study coding languages in order to be able to build anything in software toward a future which is AI-driven coding. And in effect, the elimination of coding as the main workflow for people who are building software. Because the AIs, and Cursor is just the best example of this yet, AI is going to drive the process for you and using a natural language interaction. So some people have talked about this progression also as the approach to programming in English or in whatever language you speak, because the AI behind the scenes can translate what you're saying in English into the actual code blocks that are necessary to assemble into an application. It's a major advance, and there's a lot of people talking about it. I know last night, Jyunmi and I spent an hour together, each of us separately working in Cursor to build something. Now, in 1 hour, we didn't build a lot, but we got a lot. I think each of us got a lot farther than we would have in any other low code or a coding approach. So it was impressive.
When I used Cursor, I think I downloaded Cursor about 6-7 months ago, and this was before Sonnet, and I think it was before GPT-4o, and there was something I was trying to build, and it was easier for me to code than to use it, and I was like, oh, why would I want to use this? Because it looks exactly the same as Visual Studio Code. I'll do there. I didn't, at that time I had to describe, and then I was like, well, it doesn't do it well enough for me to switch. But then I think with Sonnet and 4o, I just never went back to it. But I think a couple weeks ago, right before I went on vacation, I tried it again, and I was like, this is pretty good. This is actually pretty good that it actually can do this. Now, I'm a really big user of GitHub Copilot. That's why. So, and there's a lot of these kind of tools around. And in fact, there's a couple other ones, I think AI0 are other tools that can do something like this, but the UX of this is so much better. I think I was watching a TikTok yesterday too about it's no coincidence that Anthropic put out Claude's their output token went from 4,000 to 8,000. So, and it worked kind of well with what Cursor was. You need to output quite a lot. Now, a lot of people, I think the person from 11 Labs has been like every weekend has been building projects, the small little projects, weather apps, things that you could build like pretty easily. Well, not easily, but like it's simple. The question is, can it take on entire code bases for like really complex SaaS? So I'm thinking, what's the code base for like, say, a Salesforce? All right, take the entire code base for Salesforce. And I believe in about 6, 12, maybe 18 months, that's because of the higher reasoning. I think that's where you can safely say, I can build really complex applications now with something like a cursor through natural language. Today, I still think 18 months from now, you still need that high level knowledge of how to code. And I'm only like beginner intermediate kind of level. With true software engineers, it'll help them, but like there are some limitations with it currently. But I think like once you get GPT-6, Orion, whatever, Opus 3.4, whatever the next levels are, I think that's when you'll see the big leaps with something like Cursor or whatever else comes out, that it's true natural language build application. It's like, I want you to build. Remember when the Eric Schmidt interview where he said, hey, if the government bans TikTok, just write, I want you to create TikTok. I want you to see if it goes viral. If it doesn't, steal all and take all the information, do it again. I think that will be doable in those 6, 12, 18 months, which is, that's why for me, this is a huge step in what potentially could happen. And it democratizes the ability to create, but also is an end game I think, for a lot of SaaS companies. Because why do I need to license, or why do any businesses need to license a SaaS when your own business can build something that may not look like it, but achieves the same outcome as what that licensed tool can do, which I think is a conversation on its own.
Sorry, we're just about to talk and cough. I apologize. I was going to say, like, I see what you're saying, Karl, about like where the potential future of this is, and whether companies can be like, we'll just make our own, because it's like literally that easy. But I think going back to where it is today, when you were talking, Beth and Andy, and I'll throw this over to Jyunmi, because again, I'm certainly no expert here. But what really jumped out to me as I was researching it was the context window at all. Because if you were to do the same project just a couple of months ago, and people were amazed by using ChatGPT to fix code, but to do that meant that you had to keep copying over code and saying this part is wrong, and it fixed it. I think, Beth, you have a great point about Claude plus artifacts really started to show that sort of context window, holding that context. But when I looked at Cursor, one of the things that kept coming up was, you can ask it to look at other files. Now, I had to kind of look a little bit deeper and make sure I understood that. I've certainly seen files within code and made small changes here or there, but I understood what the guy was saying on the video, which was, it has the entirety of this entire, it has the entire context of this code and what you're trying to build. In the example that I watched, the guy was building a QR code creator. It was like creating QR codes to then go to simple other things. And he showed in the video, by the way, I want to give props to him in a second, but because it's an amazing website and blog with all but just stuff on it. But he showed as he made iterations, and he didn't like where the trash was. So he made it a three dot menu with a drop down, and then it didn't quickly go off the menu. So he was able to quickly talk about it. And he just kept talking about how really where the advantage was to him was the context, and being able that the code understood all the different parts and even the different pages, and can make multiple edits to multiple pages all at one time. And then what he was showing was he would just go through the pages and approve them. And then to your point, Beth, showing how easily it was to Control Z or Alt Z and go backwards if he needed to do that. Now, this guy, this is his name, but it was a great article. His name is Nimrod Kramer. It's at Nimrod Kramer. And it's an amazing blog that I'll share here in a second in the chat. It's called daily.dev. And he has a video where he's sort of going through that, but he talks about in the video how he is a coder. And when I watched it, what I really saw was, wow, this is a really powerful tool for an actually really powerful coder. This guy obviously is already an expert in what he's doing and building. And this was a tool that just helped him iterate. So he actually says at the front of the video that he created the same, QR code program with and without Cursor. So he built it from scratch and then he built it again with Cursor. And it was over 2 times faster for a competent coder to create the same program, which I guess goes in line with Andy and Jyunmi, what you were talking about. So I don't know, Jyunmi, can you talk more about what you did try to create yesterday, or were you and Andy both creating the same thing, or you just happened to be working at the same time?
No, we were just sort of collaborating in experiencing Cursor. And we were working on separate projects. So without giving away too much, there is a project that we've been working on in the background, slowly building up, and we'll be releasing that for everybody to try out once it's done. But as a more pressing note, I wanted to see if Cursor could help me automate the back-end process or the post-processing for the show. And so I just laid it out for the AI chat saying, this is everything that we do as part of the post-production. And can you find ways where I can automate this or streamline this? And what would I need to build to do so? And so I gave it all the systems that we use and all the services and things like that. And it sort of just guided me through, here's some of your options. I'm like, okay, well, option 2 and 3 aren't going to work for us because these systems don't have those capabilities. And then I started looking into, option 1, which was using a browser optimization called Selenium. And so you can build out using Selenium to go and literally act like a user to click on links and things like that. So that's kind of what I've been exploring. And I've been approaching it from the, I don't know anything that you're telling me, explain everything to me. And while that is a bit more of a little more tedium in there, because you have to ask, what does this mean? What does this mean? Or how do I do, you told me X, Y, and Z. Well, how do I do X? How do I do Y? Those kinds of things. But it got me to thinking that this might be a great way for project managers and project owners to understand what they're asking for when they request a project be built for them, right? What they request from their software dev team, and sort of maybe lay out what the PRD is going to be and what the expectations are, right? I want it to do all these things. Okay, well, help me build out all of these things. What are these components going to be? Oh, okay, well, I need to explain that I need to use Selenium for this thing, or these are all the packages or services that I have access to for my company or for my development environment. What can I do with this, and what can I tell my software development team to build out? So I think there's a lot of, right now, my first impressions are there's a lot of the ability to handhold someone who doesn't have direct coding experience. And this might be, depending on the way that you learn, right? The most efficient way that you learn is, it might be a great way to get over that initial barrier of, I don't know anything about code. Just seeing a page of code scares me. Okay, well, you have this friend here that will handhold you through the process, right? And so I think that's a great way to learn it. And I think Karl mentioned in another show, there was a story about an 8-year-old who was using Cursor to build out something. So I think that lends to that whole concept. So that's my my initial impressions. So now I want to get back into it and see if I can build all the pieces so that I can make a nearly fully automated back-end post-production process.
And I think, like, if you, one of the most easy ways if you want to get started is obviously go to your favorite LLM, say you're a beginner and this is what you want to build. outline how you want to build it. I think you can even say, I want to build this in Cursor. And, here's the steps to do. Here's the initial code. And then what happens is you can take that over to Cursor and then just, get AI to get you started, go to Cursor and then continue, and then leverage AI to help you keep going if you have any errors, right? So you can use multiple tools to really help you get started, which I think is really an awesome way, because when in time have we ever had the ability to learn from something, apply it, and then keep learning while doing, but something else is teaching us all at the same time? Like, you can just keep going back and forth with this over and over. And even if you're really a beginner, go take the deep learning AI intro to Python, just to give you like an overview. That should be enough to get you started, but you have an LLM to help you anyway. So it's just an amazing time to build. And while these things can't do really end to end at the moment, we're 30, 40, 50% leaps and bounds where we were last year, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, two things I want to put out really quick. So sorry, I'll say real quick.
I was going to say, to your point, Karl, you can go over to another LLM and get some guidance there. But Claude 3.5 Sonnet is right there in the chat window. So you might as well start there. So it's in the context of what Cursor is going to understand as it generates code for you. So, and I can share my screen after you're finished, Brian, just to give people who are viewing this just an idea of what the Cursor UI looks like.
Yeah, that'd be great. The only thing I was going to say was just based off of what Karl said is, I agree. This is an amazing time to learn new skills. In the past, if I was going to go to any of the learning sites, where you can buy, they're all going out of my name, but any of the ones where you can get a course, right? You could take a course and get a cert or whatever the case is. Those examples are baked into that course, right? So let's say I want to learn Python or whatever. Well, it's Hello World, right? It's going to start there, and then it's going to build from there. And it may or may not be examples that I care about. It's like, hey, over the next 4 or 5 courses or lessons, we're going to build this app. And I'll be like, I don't really have any use case for that app, but sure, okay, I'm learning along the way. They're teaching me how to build. Well, with AI, I think one of the great things here is, like you just said, Karl, or maybe I guess you're saying you can do it right inside VS Code using Cursor, and maybe that's what you'll show us, Andy. But I love the idea that if right now at this point in the year, I'm most excited about it being college football season. I wait for it all summer, and I get mad that there's not football games on, and then college football comes around, and I'm a big UGA fan, and so I get excited about that. Well, right now, at this time of year, it's a perfect time for me to maybe go into one of the LLMs. Maybe I go directly to Claude and I start building with artifacts, because that's a simple place for me to start. Maybe I do go right into VS Code. Maybe I start in GPT, either ChatGPT. Either way, I can say, hey, I need to build three levels of new programs or something with Cursor. That's my goal. The first one's got to be super basic. I know nothing. The second one, I want to build on those skills and get a little more complex. Maybe it adds a page or something else. I'm probably talking wrong here. And then the third one is my final report, certainly. But I want this to be all about college football, or specifically even more niche down to that. I think that's where it gets really, really exciting, because that now bridges, like AI can do for us, from I want to learn something, but oh great, now I can actually learn it while it's in an area that I actually have an excitement for, or a topic that I really like, or whatever. So just wanted to kind of bring it up that I 1,000% agree. But yeah, Andy, let's see what you got to share here.
Okay. So Cursor is a local application. You download it and it's running on your desktop. And here's what it looks like. It's pretty straightforward. No graphic niceties, but really clean UI. On the left, you have, the project elements that you're working with. And I am open right now on this getting started document that gives me the keys to how I can use various functions that are in Cursor when I'm interacting with code. But I'm not a coder, so I'm not yet ready to start actually developing code files. I'm starting with the chat over here on the right. And what I've done is I in this top paragraph, I describe the application functions that I want. And then it says, thank you for providing the context of your project requirements. Look, you're looking to build a web application with several key features. Here's a high-level overview of how you might approach this project. 1, front end, choose this. Back end, Firebase authentication for user, Firebase for database storage. Data structure, okay, here's the collections that you're going to build in the database. Key features. To get started, you'll need to set up a new project with a chosen front-end framework, integrate Firebase, and begin building out the core components. So it gives me a list of 7 steps that I'm going to follow. Wow, by just describing what I wanted to do, it's given me a work plan. Now I ask it another question. Well, actually I say, look, I've already created a Firebase collection because as Jyunmi said, we're working in the background on an application that uses Firebase. So I was glad that it recommended Firebase as that. And I said, well, here, I've already got these collections. So it's okay, I'm going to modify the project requirements. And here's the new list of 7. And this is what the functions are that you're going to have in your responsive web app. But then it gives me specific details for each of those things. So for number 1, setting up React on the front end, open your terminal, which is a UI on your computer that lets you write code into the so-called terminal on your computer, because it's going to be a locally run application. So, open your terminal and run, literally I can copy this or just click copy over here and then plug it into terminal. And that's going to create the React app framework that I need to run locally. Then it says install the necessary dependencies. And here it's npm install Firebase React Router DOM. I've never heard of these things before, but all I have to do is copy and paste them again into the terminal to make that happen. Okay, now it's starting to give me code blocks, and this is all truly foreign to me. I would have to study this at length. But what I wanted to point out in this process is that I have a good sort of product manager approach to these things. I know what the features and functions are that I want. I can get to a PRD, the product requirements document. I love using LLMs to assist me in developing that, but I need to turn to an engineer to write the code and build the thing for me. Well, now with Cursor, it's basically giving me the instructions of what I need to do to build this locally on my machine, and then how to manage that process of building all the component files that I need, test them, run them locally on my local machine, and then put them over on a cloud service in order to make it accessible to the rest of the population that I want to serve. So there's a really clear roadmap that I've been given by Cursor, and we're much, much closer to the time when I don't need to have a team of engineers anymore. As a product manager, I can go forward.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I want to point out that people have talked about is starting with something that you want to have accomplished for you, right? Jyunmi talked about that. We're doing like the back end of the show. These are the things that we do. And Andy talked about it running on your machine. The best way to get in this and to play with it is like, oh, okay, I could build this in Zapier, but that's like, to get it to jump more than twice, that's expensive. I could build it in Make, but now it's going to check the folder every 15 minutes unless I fix that, right? Like there are reasons why like automation, amazing, but also a pain, right? This is a way to play with that. It does not need to be like pretty or useful enough that you could sell it. Can you build your own Chrome extension? Can you build your own thing that would get it done on your machine? And then you can play it. Then you can like your own test case. Like that's what really excites me about this. Brian and I talked about like personal software, right? Like not just personalized, but literally like I built this because I got tired of doing it a different way, and it was worth an hour and a half to build it, so that I never have to worry about it again. Nobody else is going to update software. Nobody's going to, like, this is a thing. Works on my computer until my computer updates, right?
How is this any different than a custom GPT, right? It's just the next it's a different version of it, but it's the same idea, which is I build custom GPTs all the time that will never see anybody else's hand because they're literally only helpful to me. And if somebody comes up and says they have a similar use case, I'm like, I've already built something for that. I'll just share it with you and you can adjust it, right? But you're right, Beth. Like, what's to stop us from all just having like sort of, a suite of these little programs that are running that are great for us? And then obviously that leads to the future down the road where maybe they're being tied together and they become truly agentic in some way. And now they're running on our behalf, or we're pulling in information live through APIs and then running through these individual codes that, again, are only on our system. They're not meant to be public, but they help us in some way do our jobs or in our lives or personal lives or whatever. One feature that I haven't heard you guys bring up that I thought was super cool is kind of to this point, Beth, like if I'm going to get that far, I'm going to be like, I'm looking for something like this. Well, you can screen grab what you're looking for ideally and upload that directly into Cursor and say, make it look like this. And the guy that I watched, he shows that where he's like, I wanted to look like this. Now, it took him about 3 iterations. Maybe the first one, it was fully left justified and it had no borders. He's like, I need some borders, right? He fixes the borders and puts it in the middle. He's like, it needs some padding and some shadow to it. Boom, fixes the padding and shadow. He's like, I think it needs to be a little larger. Fixes that. I mean, he was live doing it on the video. Within 3 minutes, he went from uploaded image to something that resembled the whole layout of it for this QR code that he was building, or the software that he was building for the QR code. It was really, really cool to see. And so being as someone who's like super visual and I can't always explain what I want, but I'm like, but I wanted to go look like that thing. It's super cool to be able to say, this is what I'm looking for. It should be organized like this. Go build it. I think Jyunmi, the use case for me right off the bat was, fixing our website and getting it to where it's got a really cool user interface for all the shows and transcripts and things that we're building on the back end to kind of go along with that. So I think there's some really cool use cases down the road for making that a better experience. And by the way, for anybody, if you ever go to thedailyishow.com, it was like, look, it has to happen, get it up. But we all agree, like, it's not where we want it to be. It's just a matter of like, if we couldn't spend any more time without it. So it had to be created. Anyway, I just wanted to bring all that up and say that was one of the cooler features I saw was the uploading an image to it.
Yeah. And one of the things that you can do, again, because we're talking about personal stuff, Riley Brown actually posted a thing that said he rebuilt Trello, right? Now you can't build Trello, right? Like you can't build Trello and sell Trello by copying all of Trello's. I mean, I don't know, maybe you can. But as a personal project, you can totally use Trello, right? Like it's a known feature rich program, right? Because that's going to be within the training windows of all of these because they're pretty much all updated to 2022, 2023, right? So you can use something that's in the common knowledge of functionality and look. And yes, if you have a particular thing, you can sketch it out. This is what I want. I want these buttons, right? It's so great to be able to interact with these things in a multimodal way to start to like pop your imagination about what could be built to make your life easier, your job more productive. And you don't, right? Like you don't have to talk to the devs down the hall about like, hey, we'd really like this custom thing for the marketing department or HR, right? Like this is where this starts to really, I mean, in some ways, I think the most important thing you can do in preparing for AI is to work your imagination muscles. And this is a way to work your imagination muscles, like, and weights at the same time, right? Like, go for it.
That was the fun part about
slight pushback. I think, Beth, you have just triggered all of the IT managers in operations around the world. Wait, you're building your own code and it's doing things on our system and you're just doing it, not letting us know what's going on.
There's some people up in an uproar on Reddit, I'll tell you that. When it comes to this, hey, you're not going to replace my job, whatever. But to my point, I think this is not necessarily off-the-shelf replacement for coders. As I was watching the video, I was like, no, this is making coders faster at what they're doing and they actually really appreciate it. one thing I wanted to bring up, because we haven't talked about this yet, is one, their raising of 8 million and where that came from, and also what their moat is. So we haven't talked about this yet, like Cursor as the business. Well, they raised 8 million in seed funding from the OpenAI startup fund. And I think I had heard of that before, but I wasn't sure. So I went to the website. It's just openai.fund. And then you can click about. It's a very splash page, whatever. But this is what it says. It says the OpenAI startup fund is investing 175 million to help AI companies that have found positive impact on the world. We're looking to partner with early stage startups in fields where artificial intelligence can have a transformative effect, like healthcare, law, education, energy and infrastructure, the sciences, and more, and where AI tools can empower people by helping them be more productive. Well, I think we could agree that Cursor fits right in with that last little bit of the sentence. So really interesting here, not to say that Sam Altman has his hands in Cursor or anything, but it is at least interesting to talk about where they got their 8 million. And also, in today's world, 8 million in what they've produced is actually really, really low. It's like, we don't usually see 8 million. I mean, we just saw, what's his face from OpenAI raised 1 billion. We can talk about that tomorrow on the wrap-up shows and more news and stuff like that, because he's from OpenAI and he's building a safer AI or whatever, and he raises $1 billion. They're doing this on 8 million, and they've provided a product that a lot of people are generally excited about. But my next question to that to you guys is, where's the moat here? Because why can't VS Code or Google AI Studio or Data Studio or any of those just do the same thing? They're like, yeah, this is basically an LLM built on top of a code editor. Yep, got it. This isn't really, rocket science as things go. It's a nice user interface like you showed, Andy. But is that enough to protect them? Or are we just going to see this literally everywhere, all the way down to inspect when you go to a Google Chrome page and I open up inspect on the right-hand side? Am I going to start seeing Gemini as part of that where I can manipulate the code if I want to?
Well, the thing is, there's 2 points there. One is, to me, and I'm still believing in this, is there's a reason why a custom GPT, I don't think all those features are built in yet. So I feel like it's not inconceivable that you have that ability with a custom GPT eventually. It just makes too much sense to integrate it. And because Cursor is a fork of VSC, there's absolutely there's tons of ways you can fork Cursor into whatever else you want. So I'm not sure if they actually thought of it as a moat, because there's a lot of different applications that you can use. But I actually want to also bring to the point what you said, Brian, just a little bit back, where, hey, we can all personally build our own software. Well, that goes back to my point. To me, that's the end game of SaaS, because if we can build whatever we want for the outcome that we want, why would I buy Quicken or Intuit or whatever, let's say financial tools? Why would I do that when I can get something that build exactly what I want to output what I want, rather than play in a sandbox that somebody else built? I don't need to, because I can just take the screenshot and be like, hey, I built it like this, but I want it to do this. And I think also that leads into the enterprise SaaS ability too, where, each software, the dilemma for a software company is, how much do we tailor it to specific clients? Well, as a business, I'd be like, well, I just want to build it this way because it fits my business this way. So I don't need your application, because I can build it in the way that we operate, that we don't have to pay you extra, and then you have to have your CSM and all that try to work through us, which is to me, that's a fascinating concept, because wouldn't it be cheaper for businesses to build their own software to do certain things? Not that they will, they're very slow adopting, but.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of speaks to the cycle of things, right? There was initially all in-house teams for software dev. Then it cycled out to external teams or third-party teams to do a lot of software dev. This might bring back in more internal teams to do software dev, but it may just look different now when it's, like Beth said, when it starts looking like different departments are handling things and things along those lines. Yeah, and And a lot of things in tech seem to be cyclical, like in terms of, client server type of situations versus personal computers. So I think this could just be one of those cycles that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that is key in this is we talk about this probably twice a week, is educating your people who work in your business, educating yourself if you are starting down this path about what LLMs are really good at, where you can trust or have an immediate response if the answer is wrong, like we're talking about with code, versus how it works, and not trusting it too far. Again, one of the reasons that I love it as a coding assistant is because there's an immediate feedback when that error message comes up, like, oh, whoops, that didn't happen, right? That wasn't the thing. What I think is, or talking about making the IT managers sweat, I think one of the things that is tricky once you move off that is to help people understand that this tool that was super helpful and really knowledgeable and totally had your back in this project and speaks that exact same way for over here in this project, this is not a skill that you should trust as much, right? So those are the conversations we want to have. Like this is another way that your business can be transformed. And let's be clear with everybody about where the strengths are and where the weaknesses are, and that kind of field in some ways about where LLMs are in terms of reliability at this point in time.
Well, we'll wrap it up there. I was waiting for the lawnmower guy to go by. Try not to get on mic. I love the excitement. I love what you're saying there, Beth, and I want to end on that. I do want to bring in just 2 or 3 comments, because I do feel like we have the most amazing people in our comment section, in our live comment section on YouTube. And Justin was saying, he was responding to Jen. He said, "I read and watch anything I can on AI and ask questions. We're early adopters, just learning like everyone else at this point." Jen said, "That's the move, Justin. You're smart too. As we know, not a lot of people are following yet. For me, like Jude, it still feels over my head most of the time. That's why I appreciate the Daily AI Show." And then Justin had said, "Same. I love this AI outlet, Daily AI Show and Morning Crew all day." Well, we appreciate you guys very much. And I think you guys, the reason why I wanted to highlight that on the show is that that's exactly why we do the show. We've always said this, but I'll say it again. It's never, and hopefully never, comes across as people who are pointing fingers and saying, like, look at us up here and look at where you are. We're all learning together. That's the point of this. Cursor is a great example for me. Not something I would have necessarily dug into, but because I knew we were doing this show and I wanted to be educated coming into it, I researched it before the show, and then I get to learn from everybody on the show along the way. So when I say we're all in this together, I truly mean it. And I think that's what makes this show really special. So thank you guys. Thank you to everybody's comments. Thanks to all the followers. With that said, don't forget, you can go out to our website, maybe not the best website right now, but still a website, thedailyAIshow.com, which is going to be made better with Cursor someday. And you can sign up for our newsletter there. You can obviously see all the rest of our shows, but the newsletter in particular, guys, it's getting really, really good. We're getting awesome feedback from people who are doing the polls on it and giving us feedback and saying what they really love about it. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper into AI, if you want to learn some stuff that's not necessarily on this show, I highly recommend doing that. It goes out every Sunday, and you can sign up for free. It's the only time we send it out. So if that's of interest to you, do that. Please subscribe if you haven't to our YouTube channel or wherever you might be listening to us. That helps us out immensely. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Tomorrow we have our 2-week recap show. That's a really fun show because it gives us an opportunity to hit maybe Cursor, maybe some of the news, maybe any of the topics that have basically come up for 2 weeks. So a week ago, Monday, we'll cover everything from there forward. And the reason why that's great and why I love this show is that there's always more to these conversations. There's always more. Sometimes we get off the call and we have amazing conversations that aren't being recorded. And so then we go, oh man, we really should bring that up. That's a good point. So we kind of file all that away. We have our back channels where we talk about this stuff. And then we come in on Friday, on that every other Friday. And we don't, it's like the news. We don't talk about it. So it's whatever anybody thinks was really interesting that they want to talk about again. And again, we'll all learn together. So that's what's coming up over the next day or so. And then, of course, we'll be back all next week. We got the big Apple AI event. We'll be talking about that as well as a ton of other topics next week. But until then, come back and see us tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Aloha.